Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we talk about 10 of the best horror movies with horrible Rotten Tomato scores. So I get frustrated with Rotten Tomatoes all the time because it gives really bad scores to a lot of what I think are fun horror movies. And in a lot of cases that can really hurt a performance of a movie. So I'm always trying to tell people don't pay attention so much with what Rotten Tomatoes says. Don't put such huge value on that. And so I thought it would be entertaining to look through Rotten Tomatoes and come up with 10 horror movies that I think are worth watching that they give absolutely horrible scores to. And with that, let's get to the list!
And ladies, if you think Demon Night is too gross and yucky... Whoa! Thank you!
Tales from the Crypt Demon Night is a 1995 comedy horror movie. Directed by Ernest Dickerson, it stars Billy Zane, William Sadler, and Jada Pinkett Smith. The story's about high-level demons who collect low-level demons as warriors in an attempt to obtain a key containing the blood of Christ. But the key is guarded by immortal warriors called Demon Knights.
What's going on? What's in there?
So Rotten Tomatoes, at the time of recording this, gives this film a 39%. And this isn't one of the lowest on here. This is actually one of the higher rated ones that I'm going to have on this list. But I'm not saying this is a perfect movie, but this movie is way better than 39%. It's really well shot. The costume designs and practical effects, I love the way it looks, the coloring, the lighting. Just in general, it's a very fun movie. It's a very mystical, fantastical type of horror movie. But it has a lot of mood and atmosphere and some really entertaining characters, and I think it's definitely one to check out.
Pet Sematary 2.
Pet Sematary 2 is a 1992 supernatural horror movie. Directed by Mary Lambert and written by Richard Oughton. It's a sequel to the 1989 film Pet Sematary, which is based on Stephen King's 1983 novel of the same name. It stars Edward Furlong, Anthony Edwards, and Clancy Brown. A teenage boy and his father move to his recently deceased mother's hometown, where they encounter an ancient cemetery with the powers to raise the dead.
Hey, what are you doing?
Getting things ready for Mom.
Mom's dead, Jeff.
She doesn't have to be.
So this one goes down even further with only 21% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I know this movie does get a lot of hate, so maybe I'm way off base on this, but I actually really enjoy this. I recently rewatched it and was surprised just how entertaining it is and how much better it is than I think a lot of people give it credit for, because it looks cool. The special effects, once again, the practical effects are very entertaining in it. I like Edward Furlong's character, but to me, Clancy Brown just is what steals the show, what makes this movie worth seeing. He's just off the walls, just wild and savage and crazy in this. But it's got some really fun practical effects, some great gore, and one kill in particular that'll definitely stick with you. So this isn't an Oscar-worthy movie, it's just a fun one, a great popcorn horror movie, and one that I think is definitely worth your time. The Forest is a 2016 supernatural horror movie. Directed by Jason Zada, it stars Natalie Dormer, Taylor Kinney, and Owen Mackin. The story is about a young woman's desperate search for her twin sister, which brings her to a ghost-filled stretch of wilderness known as the Suicide Forest.
Something happens to one of us, the other one can tell. It's hard to explain, but I can just feel it. She's in trouble and she needs me.
Okay, so this one I think is an actual crime. It was only given a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I've actually recommended this movie before, and not just as a fun little popcorn movie. I think this is actually a really compelling, entertaining, intense thrill ride kind of movie, and one that's not a game changer, but actually pretty good. For one, it deals with a real place, the Okahara Forest, which I know I'm probably not pronouncing right, but that's a real place. It's at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan, and it's a place where a lot of people have gone to take their own life. And it's a really tragic place, but very haunting and disturbing and creepy. And I think it's a perfect setup for a creepy movie, because this is full of atmosphere, and I thought the acting was done really well. It's a small cast, but it's just a moody, creepy little movie with not a lot to it, but well put together, I thought. Without getting too deep into the real stuff, it just uses that as kind of a backdrop. And so I think it's a pretty good little movie, and one that you should absolutely check out.
She won't let you.
God help us. Event Horizon is a 1997 sci-fi horror movie, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson and written by Philip Eisner. It stars Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill, and Julie Richardson. Set in 2047, it follows a crew of astronauts sent on a rescue mission after a missing spaceship, the Event Horizon, which spontaneously reappears in orbit near Neptune.
Where's she been for the last 7 years, Doctor?
That's what we're here to find out.
So this is one of my all-time favorite movies, especially if you're talking about sci-fi and horror blended really, really well together. I just adore this movie. I've talked about it on this channel many times, but this is only getting a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I'm only using the critic score, not the audience score, because you know, I agree a lot of times with the audience score, but I'm not going to be critical of that either way. That's just your opinion. But I'm talking about the critic score because these are people whose job it is to rate movies, and they're just so far off base a lot of times on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's not even exactly their fault, because the way Rotten Tomatoes, the rating system is flawed, and that's the thing I mostly have an issue with here. But either way, I just adore this movie. I mean, it's creepy, it's disturbing, the special effects still hold up, the story. I mean, this movie has got some of the most horrific, nightmare-inducing scenes of any sci-fi horror movie out there, but it's imaginative and creative. I know it's not for everyone, and I'm not saying it's the greatest movie ever, but 34%? I mean, that's just ridiculous. So for any fans of sci-fi and horror out there, if you've never seen this one, I think it needs to be the next thing that you watch.
Let my mother go.
You'll burn.
The Devil Inside is a 2012 found footage supernatural horror movie. Directed by William Brent Bell, it stars Fernanda Andrade, Simon Quartermain, and Evan Helmuth. It's a documentary-style film about a woman who becomes involved in a series of exorcisms during her quest to determine what happened to her mother.
If you really want to help your mother, you need a better understanding of exorcism.
What do you suggest?
You need to see a real one.
So seriously, all I can say is what the fuck? This movie is given a 6%? A 6% on Rotten Tomatoes? See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, that is just insane. I understand this movie. The ending was very controversial. A lot of people were pissed off at the ending. I get it. And I also understand that not everybody's into found footage. But if you're a fan of found footage and didn't find this movie at least entertaining, I don't know what you're tripping on. I really enjoyed it. It's creepy, disturbing, with some really nightmarish scenes. I mean, as far as exorcism stuff goes, I thought it was fresh and original, especially at the time. I mean, if you watch it now, I understand that it doesn't quite hold up like it did at that time. But I found this movie to be really haunting and actually a pretty fun, disturbing ride. No matter what, I'm not saying it deserves a 90%, but 6%? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Anyone that would give it that low of a rating should be ashamed of themselves, because this is not a bad film. This is not a 6% film. I mean, I would almost accept a 50%, maybe 50, 60%, but 6%? Like, I just don't get it. Can someone please explain to me why this movie is so hated? Other than the ending, I understand they were trying something different. It was, a unique choice, okay? And it didn't really fly with a lot of people. But besides that, I think it's a pretty good little movie. So all I'm saying is this movie may not change your life, but don't listen to Rotten Tomatoes. It's way better than what they're saying it is. So if you've never checked it out because of that, give it a chance. I think you'll be surprised.
This can't be real. This can't be real.
House of 1,000 Corpses.
Hope you like what you see!
House of 1,000 Corpses is a 2003 black comedy horror movie. Written and directed by Rob Zombie in his directorial debut. It stars Sid Haig, Bill Moseley, and Sherry Moon Zombie. Two young couples traveling across the backwoods of Texas searching for urban legends end up as prisoners of a bizarre and sadistic family of serial killers.
Dr. Satan.
You know anything about the legend of Dr. Satan?
Yeah, I can show you.
Dr. Satan! Ah, Dr. Satan!
Ever since I first saw the trailer for this, I have loved this movie. I mean, I remember seeing the trailer and then being so excited to see this film. But then it took years, like a couple of years before the movie ever actually came out because there was a whole issue with distribution and whatever. But it took like a couple more years before it came out. But I was like first in line because at the time, and even still, I was a huge Rob Zombie fan. Went, and stood in line to get his albums, went to concerts. I mean, just a big fan of Rob Zombie, White Zombie at the time. And I was just so into this movie because it's a love letter to horror. It's a love letter to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but then it's also full of this weird, twisted, dark humor and the color and chaos. It's just all over the place. And when you hear him talk about this movie, he thinks it's, not a great movie. He's got so many problems with it, but I think all those things, or the zaniness, the wildness, the dialogue, just all of that is what makes this so special. Because of course, The Devil's Rejects, the movie after this, is a better film. But this one is more fun. This one is definitely one that's close to my heart. I have so much fun with it every time I watch it. And as a matter of fact, just talking about it right now has me wanting to rewatch it again. This is such an entertaining movie and one that definitely deserves a spot on your list.
I won't kill her! Shoot her!
Wait. The witness has to die.
Brain Scan.
Brain Scan is a 1994 sci-fi horror movie. Directed by John Flynn, it stars Edward Furlong, Frank Langella, and T. Ryder Smith. Horror movies and video games fascinate teenager Michael, who discovers a game that portrays murder from the killer's point of view. But soon he discovers what happens in the game happens in reality.
Brain Scan. The ultimate experience in interactive terror. You're in the game, man. You're in control.
You must think like a killer. Cover up any clues. Leave no witnesses, no evidence.
So this score is really interesting to me because I think that it must be a much more modern ranked kind of film. Because if you watch it now as a young person and a modern critic, I could see it not resonating with you and I could see you tearing up because this movie is getting a 13%. This is another one that is one of my favorites that is just being destroyed on Rotten Tomatoes. But maybe it's just because most of the people rating this, don't see it for what it is and don't rate it based on when it was out and what it was doing and all that kind of stuff, because I thought this was an imaginative, creative, very original movie for its time. I still think the premise of it could be redone and made into a really badass slasher, modern kind of horror movie. And I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen someone try to do something along these lines now. But other than that, it's just fun and charming with some great characters. And it's just really a unique little movie and a fun ride. But I do get, if people are looking at this through a modern lens, it doesn't quite hold up the same. No matter what, I'm from that era, and this movie's got a soft spot in me. So I had to stick up for it because it definitely deserves better than a 13%. House on Haunted Hill is a 1999 supernatural horror movie. Directed by William Malone, it's a remake of the 1959 classic of the same name. It stars Jeffrey Rush, Famke Janssen, and Taye Diggs. An amusement park mogul offers a diverse group of people $1 million to spend the night in a haunted house with a horrifying past. 28%? I mean, come on. What is wrong with you guys? Can you guys not have fun? I mean, this movie is self-aware. It's meant to be a little bit silly and campy and cheesy. It's from that era where these movies were just about having a good time. They weren't trying to be all-time classics. This is the epitome to me of a popcorn horror movie, one to just have fun with. And so I would never rate it that low because it did exactly what it was trying to do. I just can never understand why critics and people alike can't just see movies and realize that, hey, maybe I didn't enjoy it because it just wasn't for me, but that doesn't make it a bad movie. And at 28%, that's saying it's a bad movie. Not even just an okay or average movie, but a bad movie. And sure, there are things about this movie that don't quite hold up, but a lot of it still does. I think the special effects, the creativity involved, some of the humor, and like I said, the campy qualities of it, I think do hold up. I think it's still a very charming, fun little movie. But it's from that Dark Castle era, and the whole point of these were to be popcorn horror movies. And in that case, I think this is very successful. I think it's one of the more fun movies from that era. So if you're just looking for a movie to relax and have a good time with, and not overthink, I think this is a fantastic pick.
Now, can you promise me that no one else is going to die?
Final Destination is a 2000 supernatural horror movie, directed by James Wong and written by Jeffrey Riddick. It stars Devon Sawa, Ali Larter, and Tony Todd. Alex is among a group of high school students on a trip to Europe, but suddenly has a premonition of their airplane crashing, causing him to warn the others, but gets them all thrown off the plane. But when the plane crashes after they get off, it begins a series of deadly consequences.
It's a weird feeling.
The cabin starts to shake, right? And the left side blows up, and then the whole plane just explodes.
I mean, come on. How are you gonna give Final Destination 36%? Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, what is going on here? I mean, it's a classic, especially for the time. It was very creative and unique, and it tried a lot of things, and it really did something different in this space where there was a lot of movies that were just kind of starting to do the same things over and over. Because this is around the time when everybody was trying to remake Scream, and every movie seemed like it was another teen slasher. And this did a different take on that, and it started something I think that's very fun and unique. And I personally am not a fan of every single Final Destination movie. They did start to get kind of repetitive after a few, but the first few of them I think are very creative and really did keep me on the edge of my seat, especially back then. And once again, this feels like this is critics now ranking a movie when they weren't the audience for it and weren't the ones in theaters enjoying it at the time. But I know that most of you have seen this and probably agree with me that it's a classic and definitely way better than a 36%.
"28 days after the Lutz family moved into their dream house, they were running for their lives. The Amityville Horror."
The Amityville Horror is a 1979 supernatural horror movie. Directed by Stuart Rosenberg, it stars James Brolin, Margot Kidder, and Rod Steiger. Newlyweds and their 3 children move into a large house where a mass murder was committed, and they start to experience strange, inexplicable manifestations, which have dangerous consequences to their family.
God's peace in this house. Get out. Get out.
Now, I saved this for last, because this one just absolutely blew my brains out. Like, I couldn't believe when I saw this. This is an absolute horror classic. It's gone on to inspire so many films. I mean, most people consider this one of those really legendary foundation horror movie classics, and they gave it a 31%. I mean, what the fuck? I just don't understand what people are thinking. How can you watch this movie and know anything about film and understand when it was made, the impact it had when it was made, the movies and filmmakers and everybody that have been inspired since then because of this film? I mean, this was the OG haunted house movie. I mean, it is the OG. There really isn't anything before this. My mind is blown. The cast alone in this is incredible. Everybody in it gives just powerful performances above what you see in a lot of horror movies, especially at the time. It's moody, it's atmospheric, it's well written. The stakes are high. You feel this family. They feel like real people that you can connect to. I mean, this is a really, really good movie. Like, even if this isn't your cup of tea, I can't imagine how you would give it such a low rating. Anybody, honestly, and I'm just gonna put this out there, anybody that would rate this a 31 should honestly be embarrassed of themselves and lose their critics card. Because I can understand if it's slow for you, if it's just not your jam, like it's just because it is a slow paced movie, especially because of the era it's from. But if you can't look at film from any time prior to what you're watching now and respect it at the very least, you shouldn't be critiquing movies. I'm sorry. I'm not a film critic, man. I'm just a guy on YouTube that loves horror movies. But this is embarrassing. This is really a crime. And honestly, someone needs to do something about the way Rotten Tomatoes ranks their movies. Because like I said, more than even the critics' fault, this is the fault of the system and the way they've made it. Because just the rating system, like I'm not going to go into it here. Smarter people talk about it on other channels and whatever. But just the way movies are rated, it's really skewed, and it really makes for something like this, where you see a movie like this that maybe most of the critics weren't in love with, but they were like, it's all right. But instead of putting it like it's just all right, it's like, you know, it's an awful movie that doesn't even deserve to exist, and it's just not fair. And so I wanted to make this because, one, I thought it's fun, but two, to let you know that if you pay attention to a Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score anyway, are putting for movies, and you use that as some kind of barometer of what you should watch, you might want to rethink it, especially if you're a fan of horror movies. But mostly, I just think this is a good time. It's something I wanted to talk about. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you enjoyed this, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and ding that little bell, because that is the best way to keep track of this channel. And when I post videos like this, and I post videos like this every single week. And I also want to give a massive, huge, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys absolutely mean the world to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or if you want to help support the channel over here and become a channel member, there's a button right down there that says join. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here for 10 recommendations over on Prime Video right now. And I'll see you guys next time.